Hello, everybody. Come on in. How's everybody doing tonight? Hope everybody's doing good. It's really cold here in Wisconsin. And my sister is supposed to get 20 inches of snow in Kentucky. That's unheard of. Hello, Brenda Joe. I hope you're feeling better. I can't even imagine. I lived in Tennessee, not far from where my sister is, and we never got 20 inches while I was living there, so everything will definitely shut down because they don't have the equipment to deal with that kind of snow. Kind of funny. All right. Well, there are no updates today. Isn't that amazing? From at night. There's been some stuff going on that I don't know. I'm sure most of you heard about the Stephen Crabtree video, but we're not going to go there. Feeling a little better? That's good, Brenda. Hello, Justice Jane and Rosebud. Have I seen what? The moon and the star. Next to what? I'm confused, Rosebud. Tell me what you're talking about. So yeah, no real news. We're not really going to go into the Stephen Crabtree stuff. To me, it doesn't have anything to do with Sebastian, and I'll leave that to the others who wanna tackle that, right? Just not going to go there. But as I was preparing for tonight, I was thinking, who is responsible, right, for Sebastian's disappearance? Ultimately, I mean, the parents are responsible for a child. And the last person that we know of that saw Sebastian was... Oh, I didn't notice, Rosebud. That's kind of cool. Star, possibly a planet very close to it, very bright. That's interesting. So, I mean, typically, it's the people close. When a child runs away, it's usually like if there's no evidence that they walked out of the door, then you kind of look at the familial connection, right? And who is that but Katie? Possibly Chris. If his truck pinged in that area the weekend when he wasn't supposed to be home, and I know that's a touchy subject for him. Hello, Jackie-O. Good to see you. So yeah, it's, makes you wonder. Reach for the sky. Hello. Your poetic writing, yes. So, what I thought was we would take a look at all feet and socks. Those, yeah. Dirty socks and feet, right? Got to clean those things once in a while. Oh my goodness. So I thought what we'd do, because we don't have a lot to go on with Katie, right? We really don't. She's only given a couple of interviews. in those were a lot of inconsistent statements, right? And so we don't have a lot to go on with her. We do have a lot to go on from Chris, however. So I did notice that, I don't know how about you guys, but Lore Lodge does a really good job breaking things down. And so I thought we'd kind of watch a little bit of a video that he did in relationship to Chris, right? And really kind of he does a good deep dive. And so I thought we could, watch a little bit of it and discuss it, because there may be some things that we missed, right? In the grand scheme of things that we've gone over. Because we know that Sebastian didn't walk out of that house, right? We know that. There's just no, hello, Gigi, good to see you. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We know that he did not walk out of that home. I feel that with everything within me, right? So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to watch Aiden talking about the method of madness.
In our second Sebastian Rogers video, I learned that in the South, put the dogs up means put them away, not physically put them up somewhere, and I thank you all for telling me, and by all I do mean literally all of you. I'm Aiden Mattis, and welcome back to the Lore Lodge.
He is good, isn't he? I know Betty showed one earlier today, and I was going to, do part of that one, but then
At
I
the beginning of
thought,
July
no,
2024, I was asked to look into the case of Sebastian Rogers, a missing 15-year-old autistic boy from Hendersonville, Tennessee. In case you haven't seen the previous two videos in this series, the short version is that Sebastian disappeared back on February 26th of this year. According to the story told by his mother and his stepfather, she woke up to get him ready for school on a Monday, and he wasn't in bed.
I know, me too.
He was nowhere in the house, and there were no footprints, no scent leading away. The police have been totally unable to figure out where Sebastian went after he left the house that evening. His stepfather and his mom say that they believe that he simply left the house of his own volition. He didn't take his phone, he didn't take his switch, he didn't even take his shoes, and they don't know why, and they don't know where he might be, and they're very distraught about the fact that he has not yet been found. As we discussed in part 2 of this series, however, those parents can't be trusted to tell the truth about basically anything. Chris Proudfoot has lied about everything from whether or not he took a polygraph test to how many times he beat his son, oddly admitting that he did in fact beat his son. We also know that Chris and Katie, whose last name is Proudfoot, left their home in the middle of the search before even a month had passed from Sebastian's disappearance. And when they left their home, they said that Chris had to go back to work at a job that in that very same interview in which he said he was going back to work, well, he told Nancy Grace, the interviewer, that he didn't know if he still had that job. I'm not going to go through the entire thing that we went through in part 2, obviously, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend that you watch it before watching this. But what I want to say here is that after finishing the research for it, after shooting the video, I was extremely suspicious of Chris Proudfoot. And I think the way that I would describe this is that most of my suspicions centered around one particular aspect of the story. Towards the end of our second video on the Sebastian Rogers disappearance, the one that came out a week before this one, I said that there was a bunch of stuff that I felt I couldn't yet talk about, that I had come across, that I had noted, and that I had begun investigating, but wasn't quite at the point where I could present it and feel like I had given you the full story. And
I love this about him. He will not talk about something until he is fully investigated and gotten all the information that he can on it. He's very thorough. Very, very thorough. Right? Yes. Thank you for that, Justice Jane. Thank you for that. It's actually $250,000 now, though. What kind of doggy do I have? Lacey is half golden retriever and half Australian shepherd. She's a herder. She herds me to the bathroom or to the kitchen or wherever I'm going to go. She herds me there. But I like what he said. You know, you can't trust anything that Chris Proudfoot says, right? Yes, he is very professional. Hello, Canine. And he does his homework, right? He does his homework. He's very thorough. He takes his time. You know, he doesn't put out a video every day or go live every day, right? So he's working behind the scenes, working on all the stuff, whereas the rest of us who try to talk to everybody every day and keep Sebastian's name in the algorithm are, you know, trying to stay up to date with the updates. You know, it's like a catch-22. Yes, he does have a really good channel. He really does. He does. So let's continue on.
And when I said that, what I had in mind were accusations from some people against other people involved in the story. I was thinking about, different accounts of court battles that I needed to make sure I could nail down who was telling the truth about which situation. Basically, while we had established in part 2 that Chris Proudfoot absolutely has been lying since the start of this investigation about a number of different things, there were other factors that I needed to consider before fully putting the spotlight on the Proudfoot family. Essentially, I had a whole bunch of threads, but I had yet to follow them back to the source. Well, one of those threads that I did not weave into part 2 was a quote that Chris gave when he was asked about an accusation that he had verbally abused Sebastian's paternal grandmother. Now, silly me, I did not actually put the exact citation in line in this script, but I believe this was from either the March 3rd or March 17th interview with Duchess. And what Chris said was this: to clear up her statement about me being verbally abusive to her, unfortunately, she's not going to tell you the full story. But there's always, remember, 3 sides to the truth: hers, mine, and the truth in itself.
That statement just irritates the bejesus out of me, guys. I'm sorry. There are three sides to the truth: hers, mine, and the truth in itself. Really. I don't know. That just irritates me. Does it get to you guys? Because it does me. It just, I don't know why that bothers me, but it does.
So you can figure it out. Me and the grandmother had a conversation. And this all stems back to an incident that a family member did that, as the parents, we had consulted with law enforcement about something. They recommended not doing it. Lo and behold, something happened and something was done against what we decided. I reached out to the mom, Katie, and I asked her for help during that conversation. Some accusations got flung in my direction and toward my wife, which the mother or the grandmother actually doesn't have the whole story. She has never once sat down with me, my wife, her son, Seth, and gotten the full truth on everything. She's only heard one side of the story, and I can promise you, I've got text messages. And I'm not afraid to show them. I'm not afraid to screenshot them and let the public see it. Now, I will say, unfortunately, none of this has to do with the investigation of our son, but yes, we had a heated discussion. Now, that entire statement is very vague. It's a weird statement. It's a non-answer, because the question he was asked was basically, did you or did you not verbally abuse Seth Rogers' mother? Chris turns it around. He makes himself the victim. He says that there's a whole bunch of things that, she's never asked. She doesn't understand. She won't let me explain. But if you'll notice, Chris doesn't explain anything. And this is something that I looked at, something that I pointed out in part 2 in the video about how Chris just lies constantly. Chris has a habit of, when asked certain questions, not answering them. giving an answer, but avoiding any actual
Yes.
information being given. And while Chris said in this statement that he could prove what he was saying, that he had the screenshots, he had the text messages, as far as I'm aware, he has never released them, even months later. So, to be honest with you, I think that the reason that Chris avoids giving out actual information and the reason that he so often lied is because if he were to tell the truth about most of these questions, it would
Come back on
reveal
him.
the biggest lie of them all, which
Yep.
is what he said at the end of the quote. This has nothing to do with the investigation of his son. And throughout what remains of this video, it is my intention to give the police the tools they need to verify whether or not I am correct. Now, I do want to be clear before we get into the meat of this video. It is not my intention to claim that I have proven anything. I am not intending to make a statement of fact that Chris Proudfoot knows what happened to his son. It is my sole intention with this video to present the evidence I have collected and my analysis, my opinion of what that evidence suggests. While I will give statements of fact in this video, they will be supported by something concrete. So if I say something's factual, it's because I was able to dig up the facts behind it. I was able to provide a court record, a transcript, an interview statement, something like that. But the overall message of the video, that is my opinion based upon those facts. If I say something untrue in this video, this is me telling you right now that it is not because I deliberately gave you false information. It is because I had bad information. That said, I am fairly confident in what I've accumulated here, and by the time you will be seeing this video, all of this will have been forwarded to the appropriate authorities. Now, with all of that out of the way, I usually would give you some kind of clever transition for this, but due to the subject matter of the video, I would like to simply just introduce our partner for today, Factor. Thornbury and I have been working with Factor for over a year now, and it's...
So I like what he says because he digs into it so much that he gives what he finds over to the authorities to check out. Yes, I agree. I think he does that because he knows she will mess up. Yeah. Me too, Canine. Me too. Just, yeah, rubs me the wrong way big time. Big time. Yeah. So, you know, what that tells me when he is specifically putting things together in confidence and knowing that he's going to be giving it to law enforcement, that tells me he's very confident in what he's got, right? You know, are we going to agree with him 100%? I don't know yet, you know. I don't think I've listened to enough of what he's saying to know if I believe everything. But I do believe that here's the thing, guys. He's very intelligent, right? And I believe he looks at things objectively. So here's yet another person who is looking at the Proudfoots as being responsible for Sebastian's disappearance, right? So, you know, it makes you wonder how people can come up with a different scenario. His opinion has evolved since he started, yeah. Well, because as he gets down to he gets all the evidence and he puts it all together, it points in one direction, right? That's critical thinking. That's being objective and critical thinking. You know, it's so easy for people to say, for example, and nobody has said this, but they've said it about other creators that, that we're biased because we're biased towards Seth, blah, blah, blah. But what they don't realize is that me alone, for example, I'll just speak for myself instead of others. I looked at everything objectively from the beginning. I came into this not knowing, thinking, who took this kid? What happened? Did he run off? Typically, I'll be very honest with you. When I see that a 15-year-old kid has run away or is missing, I think they ran away. Right? Because that's the age where their hormones are raging. They're not getting along with their parents. They're trying to figure out who they are in the world. They're very confused, and there's a lot going on in their mind and in their body, right? So that's usually my first go-to, So I did look at this objectively from the beginning, and I still feel that I am. I feel that if some evidence would come along, evidence, not somebody say so, and especially not Chris and Katie say so. When they're lying like they lie, you're not going to take their word for anything anymore, right? I mean, I don't even know if I take her word for some of the timeline because we don't know if what she said was true. We don't even know if the doggone thud's true, right? We do not know. She said it, right? So let's go ahead and listen. I'm going to try to move past his little
because we actually like them. It's good food. There are lots of options. They've got 34 to 35 or more menu options at any given time. One of the more intriguing theories about Sebastian's disappearance centers on something that, at first, doesn't necessarily seem like it would be connected. And that is Chris Proudfoot's attempts to obtain primary custody of his daughter, Faith. Now, Chris has repeatedly denied that there is any connection between these two situations, but as we have established, you should not trust Chris to even tell you where he slept last night. To quickly revisit what I mean by that, Chris has verifiably lied about taking a polygraph test, being cleared by law enforcement, dogs picking up Sebastian's scent at the house, how many times he beat Sebastian with a belt, and how many times he'd been visited by CPS because he'd beaten Sebastian with a belt. So from there, it's not really a stretch to at least ask the question of if Chris could be lying about whether or not there is a connection between Sebastian moving out and Faith moving in. And along with the fact that we know Chris has lied multiple times about this case, we also have the testimony from his ex-wife and the mother of his daughter, Faith, about what her relationship was like and how he treated her children, his stepchildren from that marriage. And then wrapped into all of this are the details of Seth and Katie's divorce in 2016 and how Chris got involved in Sebastian's life and the chronology there and some accusations that were leveled against Seth that I would have to question now that Sebastian was supposedly moving in with him. In order to properly explain how all of this connects, however, I feel like I first need to give you the breakdown of how Chris and Nina's versions of this story play out. And from there, I think it's important to go over the problems, the possible inaccuracies in both accounts. Now, in part 2, we did briefly discuss the relationship between Chris and his ex-wife, Nina. And we dipped our toes into the ways in which her version of events paints a much darker picture of Chris Proudfoot, Katie Proudfoot, and really the entire Proudfoot clan than what Chris would have us believe. You see, by the time that Duchess held her panel on March 17th and invited Chris and Katie on, there was a rumor spreading, and I haven't tracked down the origin of the rumor, but there was a rumor spreading that Chris had a history of domestic violence. And during that interview, Duchess asked if Sebastian was scared of Chris. And Chris explained his perspective and told the panel that as parents, you have rules they have to follow. If they don't, there's consequences. Of course, we now know that those consequences included a belt to the rear end by Chris's own admission, but this is not the domestic violence that they were talking about, and Chris knew this. And he went on and explained that he did not have a domestic violence charge or conviction, but there had been a temporary protective order placed against him in New Mexico. As Chris tells the story, his domestic troubles with Nina began when Faith was about 6 weeks old. This would have been mid-July of 2017, shortly after he had facilitated Nina moving from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where her family was, to Hendersonville, Tennessee, where his family was. It was at this time that he says an event took place while I was holding my daughter. And he goes on to explain, I was holding my daughter in my left arm. Okay, mind you, she was a little baby. She was up against my chest, cuddled up next to my cheek and my shoulder. And he says that Nina approached him and accused him of having an affair based on a text message she'd seen. Chris said that the text came from a coworker who he not only was not engaged in any kind of relationship with, but who was also not into men. Naturally, he denied the affair, which he said resulted in Nina slapping him across his left cheek. And it was at this point that he says, I had to do what I had to do based on being a parent, which is what's best for my child. In this case, what he thought was best for his child was to file a temporary protective order against Nina, which kept her from seeing Faith until their court date. The court, however, ultimately sided with Nina, and Chris gave Faith back to her, at which point he says she jumped in the truck and flew right back to New Mexico, and within 2 days of being there, she turned around and filed the exact same thing against him. As for any connection to his missing stepson, he said that it had absolutely zero bearing on this case with Sebastian, and that he wanted to ask people to refrain from bringing that up because it has no bearing.
Yeah. Well, it has a lot of bearing, doesn't it? If he abused anyone, there's more of a potential possibility that he abused Sebastian, right? People that are violent don't usually change. They just don't. I don't know if it's an anger problem. He had to go to parenting classes several times from what I understand, right? So here's the thing though, is the disappearance of Sebastian, is it both of them along with others? Was it just Katie and then she shared it with Chris? Did something happen? What do you guys think? That's why we're here today, and Sebastian is still missing. Yeah. And we're going on 11 months this month, the end of this month, right? So the year anniversary is coming up, and I was so hoping and praying that Sebastian would be home before then for Seth, right? Not saying that can't happen, because it can, right? It can happen. But what are your thoughts? Do you believe that? I wish I could see this video that they're talking about where somebody was being carried over the shoulder. But of course, if you can't really tell who it is, I guess that's not going to give us any answers either. But was it supposedly during the time of that flashlight video? Is that when that happened? There's just so much we don't know. It's all guesswork, isn't it? It's all guesswork. It's like, who could possibly, I don't believe that he was taken out of the home by anyone else. There's no evidence that refutes that. He didn't walk off on his own. There's no evidence that suggests that at all. I know. I'd really like to know where that video was. Who said it? Who's hiding it? What's going on with it, right? I mean, they turn it over and the police, authorities said, don't show it. I don't, I guess I understand that if that's the case. But if that's the case, they probably shouldn't have said anything either, right? It's kind of like the flashlight video wasn't supposed to come out, I don't think, and it did. But yeah, you got to wonder what happened that night. Did he make it home? Did he not make it home? And if he didn't make it home, then what's going on as far as the flashlight video, right? I mean, I don't know. There's just so much going on here, and there are no answers for anything. Yeah, Nina was treated very badly. And, think about this. Katie is in the same role that Nina once was. And Katie knows how Nina was treated. Katie was part of how Nina was treated. Was she not? Smiling and video recording everything, right? You think she's maybe shaking in her boots a little bit with that family? You gotta wonder, right? Did she allow Sebastian to be gone because Chris wanted Nina? And that family pushed her into that? I don't know. Right? We're trying to understand the workings of her mind for that night. And I guess, we'll never really know, but I try to look at what would a mother, yeah, canine blood is thicker than water, you would think, right? But we all know she didn't bond with that child. She didn't. Seth bonded with Sebastian, not Katie. It seemed like all she kept wanting to do was get rid of him. Why didn't she just let Seth have him? When she decided to come to Hendersonville, why didn't she just let Seth have Sebastian at that point? Makes you wonder. I think part of that reason is because she hates Seth. She's not going to let him. That's my thought. I could be wrong, right? No, you're right, Canine. They won't if, but I think they're all in it now. They have no choice but to stay together until this whole thing blows wide open. Then I think you're going to see some divorces going on here. I really do. Just the only thing that I have about, I've seen some of the things that CB has said, and she's got kind of a personality like or her son has her personality, however you want to say that. But TB, the only reference I have of him is on Betty's video where he was following her and then she confronted him. Blood is thicker than water. Yeah, I mean, I think it is, but in this case, do you think it's going to be thicker than water for Katie? I think it should have been already if that was the case. It's my opinion. I think, for CB and Chris and, that's all gonna stand together, that whole family, no matter what, But yeah, it really surprises me. I kind of want to push this forward a little bit and see right here.
She says that the Proudfoots got in their cars and followed her and her father down the interstate at 80 to 90 miles an hour. On its face, this seems rather strange simply due to how absurd it is, but absurdity is not evidence against something. Absurd things do happen. But there are further issues with this portion of the narrative that should probably be considered. One question I have is if she actually meant interstate rather than just highway, because the only interstate route in the area that would lead to Albuquerque is I-40. And the nearest entrance to I-40 from Gallatin, Tennessee is near West Nashville. What that means is that if they were chasing her on the interstate, they had to follow her 30 to 35 miles through or around Nashville just to get to I-40. Now, it's not impossible, it's just a little hard to believe. And of course, on top of that, there is the option that she may have just thought she was being followed because she was panicking. And the reason I include this segment in this section about stuff that can't be corroborated is the chances that there's going to be evidence of this car chase are just extremely slim. I mean,
and I'm with Aiden on this one. I did question this. And he's right. I know the area. There's about 35 miles before you can even get onto I-40, the interstate, right? So I think that, and judging, and this is nothing against Nina, don't get me wrong, guys, but judging by her demeanor, I really think she gets a little bit overly emotional, okay? And she was probably pretty panicked. And not saying that she didn't have good reason, right? But when you're panicked, you do get a little paranoid. You do. And so I'm thinking she maybe panicked and thought somebody was following her, But have you ever been on the interstate and I don't know about you guys, but I go 5 miles over and I set my speed for that. And if that means going around people in the left lane to keep my speed control on, I do that. And have you ever noticed people will follow you then? Right? Maybe that was what was happening. So let's see. Katie is not blood. You're right. Makes me sad how KP isn't pleading via news, etc. Yep. Oh, Jackie, that's sad. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I know. When the House of Cards falls, I can tell you that, the socks and the actual feet, will stand together, and Katie, who is really a Payne or a Rogers will be left off at the wayside. They'll throw her under the bus, no doubt. Yep. Then you do feel followed. Yeah, exactly, because you do kind of feel like you're being followed in that kind of an instance. And I think she just got overly emotional. I don't think that, however, we saw the video of TB following Betty. So would they go to those lengths is my question. I mean, they did go to quite dire lengths to get Faith. They have been fighting for a long time. Oh, she's got poop on them. She may. More than likely, Rosebud, she does, I would think. She may very well. Let's continue seeing what he says here.
This many years on, nobody's going to remember if they may have seen a car chase on I-40 on October 3rd, 2017. It's just not going to happen. It might be worth law enforcement looking in to see if they can find evidence of her car making these motions on that day, but I doubt it. The other one that really jumped out was what happened after the TPO was served, with her going over to the Bowersox residence to speak with Kathy and then being threatened with a bat by Terry. In addition, she also said in her story that they claimed Chris had already returned to San Diego at this point, but that she saw Chris's shadow in the room. Again, hard to corroborate. And the reason that I say this isn't possible to corroborate is, well, you might be able to use like cell phone records or something else. I mean, obviously he was in the Navy, so maybe his movement was tracked in some way. Somebody would have to admit that Terry threatened her with a bat in order to corroborate this story fully. And nobody's going to admit that Terry threatened her with a bat. The good news is that outside of those, basically everything else she said happened would or should have been recorded or observed by outside witnesses. But not all of those claims have been corroborated yet, such as Chris removing the furniture from the home. An example of this would be what happened immediately prior to the highway chase, which is that whole affair with the custody transfer at the sheriff's office in Gallatin. I will say I reached out to the sheriff's office in Sumner County, which is the one that would be in Gallatin, and they told me that they had no record of this happening and no recollection of this happening, and that everything up until an ex parte motion filed in New Mexico was handled by the Hendersonville Police Department. That said, everything I'm about to say still remains true regardless of what they said there. That's because Nina claims that everything from her driving up to the sheriff's office to her being led into the sheriff's office was live streamed. If this is true, then as Aiden and I kind of joked about earlier in, a bit of foreshadowing, the TBI or the FBI should be able to subpoena Facebook's live streaming records from all of the Proudfoot's accounts. At the very least, they should be able to confirm whether or not any of those accounts live streamed on that date and at that time. And in addition to that, unless those live streams were deleted afterwards, then they may be able to actually verify what happened. If there aren't any records of live streams, then obviously that's not great for Nina's account of events, but it's possible she just misunderstood what they were doing when they were holding their phones up. Thing is, if this did happen at the Gallatin Sheriff's Office, then the Sheriff's Office, you would assume, would have security cameras looking out at the parking lot that should have witnessed this happening. And they should have had security cameras that witnessed her being led inside and kept in a back room. Of course, that requires those videos also not being deleted. But if there's a chunk of security footage missing from between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. on that morning from the sheriff's office, I would argue that's suspicious as well. But that said, I contacted the sheriff's office and they said that this didn't happen there, but instead happened at the Hendersonville Police Department. And if it happened at the Hendersonville Police Department, well, then the same rings true. There should be security footage of this. Now, directly connected to this part of the claim is the part of the claim where she was shuffled into the back room with the lights off, all of that. I did call her lawyer, as I said. It took me a while to get him to open up to me at all. He did not want to talk to me. He's probably got a whole bunch of calls from journalists over the last few months and did not want to talk to another one. But after basically proving to him that I knew the details of the case as well as I possibly could. He opened up a little bit and he told me that he had no recollection of that phone call, of telling the police that this would be bad for Chris's career. Actually, we never got that far in the conversation. He had no recollection of this at all. He did not recall the phone call. That said, he did not impugn Nina's reputation. He did not say that she was lying. He just said he had no recollection, and he felt the need, unprompted, to tell me she's a good woman. Like, I did not ask, what's your opinion of Nina? He just said, she's a good woman. But like I said,
That's interesting, right? For that lawyer to just volunteer that information, that she's a good woman, right? Yeah. Yeah. Somebody is going to end up there. I really believe that. And that's a good point. Emotional or paranoid? Maybe, I think, a little bit of both, right? Because you got to be emotional to become paranoid. I think those two kind of walk hand in hand, don't they? When you're faced with people that want to bring harm to you each day, you wake up, you're in fight or right. Yeah, it doesn't go away. And when you know that they have contacts in the city and in the police department, and you know, yeah, right. I mean, it would make you very paranoid. And Canine, yes, I do believe that Nina is a good mom. I believe that with all my heart. Like I said, no shade against Nina. There, if she was emotional and paranoid, if she wasn't emotional or paranoid, I would have been worried, because she had been through a lot, right? A lot. I'm The only thing that I would say that I disagree with Nina with is, why the heck did she marry that man? But yeah, I mean, I don't. Is he that much of a charmer? Because I don't see it. I do not see it. I'm sorry, I don't see it. Even when he's trying to be nice, I can't stand it, because I can see right through it. He's only being nice to get what he wants. I see right through it. And so, it's like, ugh. That's the only thing I disagree with her on. She, and she agrees too. She said, "I wish I hadn't done it." Right? Yeah, hindsight's 2020. uh,
all of this, based on how many cameras should have been involved, should be corroborable without any statement from anybody. Going back to that overall category of verifiable yet uncorroborated claims, I think that Nina's story about the airport also kind of falls into this category. And that's primarily because there's been no evidence presented to the public to back up her claims. That said, I really have no reason to doubt this part of the narrative based on what I've learned overall about the Proudfoots. And, obviously there's more coming in this video, so that stuff too. I have no reason to doubt that she's not telling the truth, and that does appear in the court records, that a psych evaluation was requested, and that it was requested after this all occurred. So I think that one would be pretty easy for law enforcement to verify if any of that happened. Airports are some of the most closely monitored places on the planet. So if this happened, the law enforcement can absolutely determine what went on here. That said, just because the overall story of what happened at the airport may be true, I am a little curious about some of what Nina said, because there are a few contradictions, such as her saying who went to the airport with her. She only names her boyfriend Wayne, her son Noah, and her daughter Isabella as accompanying her and Faith to the airport, but then she also said something that implied her mother was there too. Specifically, that was, and oh my God, my mom, like the first thing she thought was like, and Wayne thought it was like, oh my God, Nina's going to just lay her out. Again, could be misspeaking, could be her misremembering the events, but either way, it would suggest that she's not a perfectly reliable narrator, and that should be factored in when considering her allegations. And that's in addition to the conflict of interest. But before I go any further in this, I just want to be clear about the reason I formatted this way, the way I organize things, because I have no intention of saying that Nina is lying. I have no evidence to suggest that Nina lied. I just wanted to point out that there are some places where her story may have holes. Whether those holes are a result of lies or just misremembering, as I said, I have no evidence to say. You know, she's only made, so far as I can tell, the one appearance, whereas Chris has made numerous. And the only reason I was able to really pick up on Chris's lies was because they showed up as he did more interviews. Fortunately, there are some things about her story that can be verified without needing to wade through any hearsay. Chris presented his relationship with Nina as very much like Katie's with her ex-husband and said, "We have a great relationship with each other," while Nina clearly described the opposite, and the evidence is on her side. The court records from New Mexico show a clear and consistent pattern of Chris Proudfoot motioning to modify custody with clear resistance by Nina, and there is no such history of custody battles between Katie and Seth. I know using that quote as an example may seem like a reach, and if it were not part
I like what he said there. There is no history of custody battles between Katie and Seth. Okay, let's see what we got here. When your daughter was stalked, yeah. It's a very difficult thing to go through. Why did she marry him? Yeah. Well, I think to a degree. I think there's still people who can see through that. You know, especially with all the knowledge out there today in regards to people like narcissists who, you know, well, I'm glad to hear that, Rosebud. That's good. Hello, Ida. Dan, good to see you. Hello, Caston. KP was beat down by the family and CP over Sebastian because of his autism. Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think she was beat down by the family, but I think that she likes their standing in the community. I think she craved that more than she craved her own son. You know? And when it came, you know, didn't we hear that Chris had said it's either me or Sebastian? Who did she choose? I mean, we can say we don't know, but I think we do know, don't we? Because Sebastian's not here. Yeah, I don't think she lied purposely on anything. I think that she was very emotional. I think maybe a little bit paranoid in some areas. Mostly in the 80, 90 mile an hour chase all the way to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Do I maybe see them following her out of town for a ways? Maybe. That's a possibility, but not all the way to Albuquerque. I don't see that at all. And if that was the case, I think like when she stopped for gas and stuff, she would have seen them. Right. She's no shrinking violet, that's for sure. Yeah. She got her daughter back. It's because the judge finally told them they had no evidence. Yeah. Which they don't. Gotcha. Yeah. I understand, Jackie. I gotcha. I dealt with one too, so I know what that's like. But yeah, there are people who just fool you. I can honestly say I know Chris would never fool me. He wouldn't. Yes, absolutely. We're glad you're here tonight. Right. She would have had to stop, especially with she had all her kids with her. And Faith was little at that time, right? I think she was scared and panicked. Yeah, I agree. But she put herself there, right? I mean, she put herself in that position when she married Chris, and she's made the choice not to get out of it. If it's true that he said it's me or Sebastian, then she should have walked away with her son, because no mother should ever be making a choice, had to make a choice between her child and the man she supposedly loves. That should not happen, my opinion. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I agree. Well, for Katie is 4 times because she's number 5. For Nina, it was 3 times, and that's bad enough. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't know if you were talking about Nina or Katie. Yeah. Well, Nina was 3 times married before her, and Katie 4 times. I mean, that's not, and he's still pretty doggone young. That's not a good track record, right? It's just not. You know, it's not like he's a celebrity. Because we all know many celebrity marriages only last a couple years, right? And they move on, and it seems to be the norm for them, but that's not how it is in real life, as everybody likes to say, going real life. Yeah, that would be me. Something's wrong here, right? Something's wrong here. Here's my question. Did he did did he not tell her how many times he'd been married? Nina or Katie? I don't know. It's a thought, guys.
Of a larger pattern of dishonesty, I probably wouldn't even mention it. But it is part of a larger pattern of dishonesty, and the lie is relevant. In addition, there is a contradiction between Chris and Nina's version of events, which on its face may seem insignificant. But it tells us that, for whatever reason, Chris is not telling the truth about the timing. When Chris told the story, he said that Faith was 6 weeks old when Nina slapped him, and he filed for the TPO immediately. Since Faith was born June 2nd, 2017, even if we give Chris, 5 to 7 weeks as a bit of a buffer, this means that he could only have filed that TPO between July 7th and July 21st. Nina, however, said that this happened after Chris moved them into their apartment in Tennessee at the end of August, and that she was only served with papers after returning from Vanderbilt in September. In this case, there is no he said, she said. This is a legal proceeding, and it's present in the Tennessee court records. Nina was not served with a TPO in July when Faith would have been 6 weeks old, nor was she served in August, which could be perceived as immediately after this. Chris filed for that TPO on September 14th, 2017, when Faith was over 3 months old. Chris either waited a full 2 months to file the TPO, in which case he lied about filing it immediately, or he lied about how old Faith was when the incident occurred. This isn't to say that Nina can't be lying about anything, because she could be. The important part here is that we now know that Chris is willing to lie about his history with Faith, and that he definitely lied about the timing of this TPO. The question is why, and how does that connect to the disappearance of Sebastian Rogers?
Why, right? Why? And how is that connected? You know, I don't know. Why does Chris lie? Because he thinks it'll get him out of something. Because he's done something that he knows he shouldn't have done. Is that something that he learned as a child? So he was afraid of getting into trouble, so he lied his way out of it. And now that's his go-to? I mean, it's a thought, right? That could be something that's been ingrained in him ever since childhood. His mother believed his lies, so that's a pattern that he developed. We know that he gets defensive very easily, right? So he does think he can manipulate anybody, Jackie. I agree with you. He really does. He thinks he can manipulate anybody. I have watched him go on panels and think that he could manipulate people. And it's blown my mind. It's like, you really think you're going to be able to do that? The one person that really stood up to him was Terry Lynn. She just blasted him right back. Not that I think that that's the way we should handle those kinds of things, but he does. He thinks he can manipulate anybody. Yeah. Especially men. And he said he's not afraid of men. I think he is. And that may be from his childhood as well. He thinks he has control over women. I think he's got a very low opinion of women. That's my opinion. I know, Canine, right? He does get away with it. It was kind of funny, wasn't it? I'm going to go on record here and say I didn't agree with what she did and how she did it, because it didn't solve anything. It just kept it going and going and going. Yeah, but he did. He learned that. I think he learned from that experience that not all women are going to be melting at his feet, right? In fear. He likes that fear and that control. He really does. He likes the fear and the control. And, That's his MO. And, you know, it blows my mind, honestly, that he has gotten away with it for most of his life. You know, and from what we hear, his ex-wives are afraid of him. You know, why? You know, what are the connections that this family has to make people walk in so much fear? Hello, Kay. Right? I mean, because Terry is not his father. Maybe his father was very controlling. Hello, Ginger. I know. For the life of me, I can't see it. His mom has been his protector all his life, according to the rumors. That's why he's so triggered. Nobody's going to go after his mom. He's triggered with his mom. His mom and his truck. Could be a country song. We could have a country song. Don't you talk about my mom and don't you talk about my truck. Let's see what he has to say about connecting the dots before I start singing, because you don't want me to sing.
Having gone through the story of Chris Proudfoot and Nina Gomez's relationship and how faith affected it, I want to turn your attention back to the original question at hand. Is it possible that Sebastian moving out of the Proudfoot home had something to do with Faith potentially moving in? Chris has been adamant that this is not the case, but there is a pretty big piece of evidence that he has not been able to overcome. And to my knowledge, that he has not denied. Chris Proudfoot told Seth Rogers that he did not want Sebastian around his daughter. Speaking on the Pascal show on April 5th, Seth said that people were asking Chris why he didn't want my son around his daughter, and he kept telling me that if people kept asking the question, he's going to answer it. As for what he meant by this, Seth elaborated that Chris said that if he tells them, people will stop looking for Sebastian. Pascal then clarified, so you're telling me that he looks at Sebastian like some kind of predator, to which Seth simply replied, yeah. As for why, Seth tied it to something that happened to Sebastian under Chris and Katie's watch while they were still living in San Diego. Seth mentioned during a few different interviews that when Sebastian was 8, Chris and Katie left him alone with a 13-year-old boy, and as a result, Sebastian had his innocence taken from him. He used more explicit terms at other times, but I'm sure you can grasp what I'm suggesting here. Seth went on to explain that he felt that Sebastian had not received the proper kind of care or counseling, and that as a result, he hadn't properly processed or recovered from the traumatic experience. My son is a victim, he said, and if victims don't get the proper help, they repeat because all of a sudden they think it's normal. And studies show that victims of childhood sexual abuse will go on to become offenders themselves. So Seth is completely right about this. He continued, my son's autistic, and if he doesn't get the proper help, we don't want him to become that. And there's multiple different ways, but if you're not certified in the proper way to get him help, you're just going to make it worse. And the implication here, while never explicitly stated, is that whatever therapist or psychiatrist he was seeing did not have the correct credentials or training for this kind of trauma. Pascal was understandably confused as to what Sebastian had done to cause Chris to see him as, quote, some sort of monster, and Seth explained that Chris doesn't see him as innocent because Sebastian had done some questionable things. In Seth's opinion, these were more issues of Sebastian having autism and not understanding social cues or personal boundaries. So the things that Sebastian was doing, according to Seth, were more along the lines of, while in the men's room, revealing a certain part of his anatomy and asking other men what theirs looked like, which Seth said was innocent kid stuff. Probably not the best terminology, but with autism, he's not really wrong. You know, I'm sure there are other people here watching that remember in grade school that, you know, sometimes the autistic kids, especially back in the 2000s when this stuff wasn't nearly as well understood or normalized, sometimes would pull their pants all the way down in the bathroom. I would be willing to bet just about every guy who went to public school has experienced that. It was never a predatory thing. It was not understanding that that's not what you do at that age or in public. In any
Interesting, right? Every guy has probably experienced that. I was going to say, because I'm a woman and I never had experienced that, but I'm glad he's bringing it out, you know. And Robin, we don't know. They may see it. I mean, if you think about it, look at Dog at night and Nick coming on the case. It's clear that they see it. And they're working. I mean, you know, they have been in communication with law enforcement. I mean, yes, they're working independently, but they share things. So I think the police know. It's just the fact that they have to build a case. And we want that case to be solid. Because once they make an arrest, we want that to move forward. Right? I think so. I think because I've never experienced that in the bathroom at school. I will say girls can be mean and they can be bullies. I've seen that, but you have, Ginger. Yeah, yeah, that's sad. That's sad. But I mean, they don't know better, right? And you know, Sebastian, having been through SA when he was little, oh my gosh, he did not need that, right? And let's continue on with Aiden here because he makes a really good point here. I want you to hear what he has to say.
case, so far as Seth was aware, Sebastian had never done anything like this to Faith, who he says Sebastian saw, or sees, if we're being optimistic here, as a younger sister. And this was confirmed in Nina Gomez's interview. Both Nina and Seth told separate interviewers that Sebastian and Faith had a normal sibling relationship, and they talked to each other on FaceTime, even though they weren't blood relatives. They just saw each other as siblings.
And here's the thing. You all have even said it in chat. You felt that Nina was a very good mother, right? And so you know that Nina was probably watching Faith and Sebastian interact with each other as well as Seth watching the two of them, right? And they both said they had a normal sibling relationship. That's a good point to be bringing up.
Said, to my knowledge, Chris has not denied this conversation with Seth taking place, nor has he made a statement contradicting Seth's claims. Katie, on the other hand, has. Her response, however, was a Facebook comment that said that the boy who assaulted Sebastian was not 13, that they did not allow Sebastian to be abused, and that he did get help. What she didn't do was clarify the boy's age, which makes me think that he was probably closer in age to 13 than to 8. She also didn't name the therapist Sebastian was seeing, nor did she give any indication of what that therapist's credentials were. On the other hand, she did admit that Seth was involved in the therapy. And in my opinion, that actually makes Seth's argument stronger, because if he was involved in the therapy, then he is familiar with the treatment and has every right to believe it was inadequate. In addition to that, rather than clarifying anything that she said about the situation, she added that Seth was banned from the base for his violent tendencies. And then she said something weird. According to her, Sebastian was seeing therapists to help him with trauma from Seth's abuse and the trauma from being assaulted by this child. That part struck me because there appears to be no record of Seth ever abusing Sebastian outside of his 2016 divorce proceedings with Katie Proudfoot.
I love what he said there. And you guys know that Katie has more than likely spewed this garbage to her friends that are online, right? And that's why they're all rolling with this narrative that Seth is this and Seth is that and blah, blah, blah. But there's no evidence outside of the divorce. And she didn't get her way in the divorce. He got joint custody. So, they seem to forget that that was all, negated in the divorce settlement. Boys are so silly, right? Yeah, exactly, Robin. If I can't have them, you're not going to get them. Hello, Pitter Patter. Good to see you. I agree. Ginger. He did. Instead of just putting a diaper on him and sending him to school because they were embarrassed. No, and yeah, you make a really good point, SRB. I don't think they intentionally meant to let it happen. I don't think so. But it did. And that means they weren't paying attention. But I don't think it was intentional. Yeah. Think about all that poor kid has been through. I don't even think the divorce was the first trauma. I think, whatever was going on with him and Katie, I think Sebastian was in the middle of it, unfortunately. And I don't, how things like that happen. It's not right. It shouldn't have happened, but, kids hear things, see things, and they learn to play them one against the other. But then, yes, after that, what's happened to him? I know, right? But here's what I am going to say. She did start saying all this stuff to make him look bad, but in the beginning, she said he was a good dad, right? But and I'm gonna say this. Seth did say in publicly that he felt Katie was responsible for his son's disappearance, right? And so she's lashing back. That's what happened, right? So, I mean, it's sad, but divorce, it's just not a good thing, right? And then, instead of coming together, because Seth, I believe 1000% that Seth would have worked with them. No matter what he thought in his mind, he would have worked with them to find Sebastian. But you got to realize that they weren't going to work with him ever. They just wanted him to shut up and go away. And if he would have done that, they would have been supportive of him. They wanted him to shut up and go away because they're responsible, in my opinion. And they were never going to work with him. Not unless Seth shut up and went away. And I'm glad that Seth is not shut up. I'm glad that he's been consistent in saying, this is about Sebastian. I want my son home. He belongs home with me. right? He's been consistent in that. Exactly, Ginger. How could a mother not feel responsible? You know? But I think I think she's not so much feeling responsible as feeling guilt. And whatever happened in that home, now they're selling it. To me, that has guilt written all over it. You can't stand to stay in the home. What if your son comes back a year from now and you're not there anymore? If that's really what happened, that he walked out of your home, which we all know he didn't. I know. I completely agree with you, Kay. We know he was waiting to try and get Sebastian in the school, but I honestly believe if he had known about those, he would have taken him. If he would have recognized the urgency, and maybe there were cues and he missed them. That's normal. That happens. Anybody can miss a cue. Anyone else think that if Seth hadn't kept talking, we wouldn't be here? Absolutely. The case would have gone cold. Everybody would have moved on. There would only been a few, I would have picked it up once in a while, I think, just to say, where is he? But when you don't have any information, it's really hard to talk about. It's like the Emma Baum case, Suzanne Simpson case, Stephanie Damron case. When you don't have any information, you don't have anything to talk about. I'll even admit it's hard to keep thinking of things to talk about every night with Sebastian. But I do it because I care and I want that algorithm to keep his name out in the spotlight. Because his face needs to be seen every day. And his name needs to be out there so that he can be brought home wherever he is. Yeah. She doesn't, but here's my thoughts on this, is why she's only did a few interviews and stayed pretty much behind the scenes this whole time. Is I think Katie is experiencing some deep-seated guilt. I don't know what that all means, but I think that she's feeling some pretty deep-seated guilt. And if what Chris said is true, that she's screaming from the housetops silently at home, well, I think she's screaming because she's guilty. She's scared. There's a reason, even we don't know what went on behind the scenes, whether law enforcement was putting pressure on her to plead the fifth or whatever. If they wanted to talk to her again and she pled the fifth. I don't know how that all came about, guys. But I will tell you this. And she's got every right to do it. She has every right, according to the Constitution, to plead the Fifth Amendment. But why, after 10 months, did she feel she needed to do that? What's happening? There's a lot of pressure on right now, right? There's a lot of pressure on this case about finding Sebastian. And if she's guilty, then she's feeling quite a bit of pressure. Yeah. Yep, they would have clammed up. They wanted this to go away. Think about it. They didn't even want anyone around their house. After the police were initially there, I mean, Chris threatened CJ, and CJ wasn't even going to go there. He never said he was going to go there. And even when he did drive past, what he was doing is he was looking for security cameras and doorbell cameras to see which ones were, to kind of figure out a way that Sebastian maybe could have gone out of the house without being detected by any camera, right? And if you look back on one of my videos, I show you CJ's analysis. So that was the only reason that he was in that neighborhood. He was he was being a detective, right? He was being an investigator, checking where those cameras were to see how Sebastian could feasibly leave the house without being seen. And it was the opposite direction, and it was between the houses than what they went with the flashlights. Really, I encourage you to look back at that video. But yeah, guys, more and more and more. Hello, Nutter. Good to see you. I'm more and more convinced that the responsibility lays at Chris and Katie's feet. I believe that 100%. That's not to say if any evidence came up to prove otherwise, that, my mind wouldn't change, because I'm open to that. But with everything that we know, with the lies that Chris has told, and with Katie pleading the fifth, them selling the house, there's just too many of these things that are factoring in to make it. They are just making themselves look more guilty than anything. Any of you that have owned a home, and it's a $650,000 home, is it not? Right? All right. So you may put something down. I don't know what you put down on it, right? Say you even put $100,000 down. Yay for you if you got that kind of money, but say you did. Say they did. They still owe $550,000 on it plus interest. They have a mortgage on it now, right? So they bought it in 2022. Okay. So a little over 2 years ago. They don't have any equity built up in that home. None. Zilch, zero. Unless they put way more down on it than what we know. Right? So they're going to take a loss on the home. That's my opinion. Why? Why are you going to take a loss on that home? Why do you feel the need to leave there? If nothing happened there, it can only have good memories. Tell me if I'm wrong, guys. What would be your thoughts on that? If your child went missing from your home and nothing nefarious happened there, would you feel the need to leave and to sell the home? I'm really curious. No, I agree, K9, because I think something happened there. And I hate to say that because I'm still believing that Sebastian is alive, but I feel like something happened there that makes Katie not want to stay there. That's my thoughts. I know, right, Nutter? Why? And it's not because people are always going by there, not anymore. Right? If you ran away, you would wait there. SRB, no way. I'd sit by the door day and night. How would I know if he came walking up to the door if I moved, right? I would not leave just in case my son was looking for me. Exactly, guys. That's exactly my thought. You wouldn't get me to leave there. I mean, selling that home makes no sense. They're going to take a loss on it. It makes no sense. Except there's just one word for it: guilt. That's, there's no other explanation for it. None. I don't know. But I think we're going to leave it there for tonight, and the neighbors are rejoicing. They probably are. Here's my grannyism. There are monsters, and it is okay to be afraid of them, but it's not okay to let them win, and it's not okay to be one. And I think of that more about being on the YouTube streets. There are monsters, and but we can't allow them to win, and it's not okay to be one. And there's a fine line, right? There's a fine line. We can't be vengeful, because then you become a monster, right? You can't become vengeful. You can't, start tearing at other people. Are you just going to leave a note for law enforcement saying where to find you if he comes home? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but there's not much equity in it. And there's no equity in it. Not with a little over 2 years. It's a well-known family in Australia whose son, Daniel Morecombe, disappeared. They still live in the same house. Yeah. Well, how many cases, how many times have we read how children that have been missing have come home years later? Couple years, whatever, right? You hear it all the time. So, all right, everybody. Good chat tonight. We will see you tomorrow night. You have a great night. Thank you for watching another episode of Granny's Crime Busters. We really appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to subscribe and like and even share the content. You can follow us on any of our other social media platforms at YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We really appreciate you guys, and you can also email us at granniescrimebusters@gmail.com. Thank you so much, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.